Gentlemen are all loaded with, I believe, 5 rounds? 5. Mind your ears, folks, it's going to be loud.
Section 1, cover fire!
Each section moves up, covered by the other section.
Drop! Drop! Section 1, advance!
This is the way you cover and shut. And now the men are at the point where they would be ready to do a bayonet charge into a trench. So we're going to have a couple of guys lining up over here to show you the basic attitude for charging with a bayonet, which is run and stab. That's the war face. Yeah, it's short, quick jabs. Thank you, Sergeant. Make sure your weapons are clear. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you turn around, we have a demonstration of a first floor artillery piece.
So ladies and gentlemen, we're about to see a blank firing by an 18-pounder field artillery piece. This was the workhorse for the Canadian Expeditionary Corps during the First World War. And if that wasn't enough, they're going to give us another round. So as you can see, it's a quick-firing breech-loading artillery piece. The shell is inserted into the open breech. This is a direct line-of-fire artillery piece. It was designed to support the infantry on the battlefield. And the protective shield at the front of the gun is designed to protect the gun crew from enemy fire. Let's give that a round of applause, shall we?
Section 2, we're good. Section 1, cover fire! Cover fire, cover fire, section 1! Section 2, cover fire!
Did I tell you it was going to be that?
Right there! Stand down, 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 down.
About 500 rounds in action. Without a machine gun, this is actually an efficient way of making it.
Section 1, cover fire!
Notice that it's also they're not working forward, they're just taking careful steps forward. So now we've advanced down towards the trench line. The men would make a run into the trench. And then they would engage the enemy with grenades and the bayonet. And this is going to be the bayonet part. You'll notice they make short jabbing motions. You just want short jabbing motions. You don't want to get your bayonet stuck. I suppose the kids are scared. It's a demonstration.
We're demonstrating what it
That wasn't so loud, was it? So as you can see, the artillery piece is loaded at the breech, at the reel. The shell is inserted. The gun can fire multiple times in the course of a minute. Its primary function was to support the infantry on the battlefield. And it was designed to go right into the heat of the action. The shield at the front of the gun was designed to protect the crew from enemy fire. I think that deserves a round of applause, don't you?
You know what?
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Her Honor will now inspect the troops on parade.
It's just up the river, and I thought I got a good position. 400 people stood right in front of me. I'm like, I didn't. Sorry? Not free. It's on the same side. It's still not awesome. There you go. The other kinds of things on there. Anything that you didn't happen to get.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Private Winthrop McClare, an underage soldier from Nova Scotia, wrote that, "You've no doubt heard before this of the big advance of the Canadians in the capture of Vimy Ridge. I was in the whole of that battle, and it was hell. I got a small splinter of shrapnel through the fleshy part of my shoulder. It was very slight, and I went through it all with it. It was some battle, I'm glad to say that I was through it, as it will be one of the biggest things in Canadian history." Writing in his diary on April the 9th, Lieutenant Edward Sewell of Ontario recorded that Canadian soldiers this day did more to give Canada a real standing among nations of the world than any previous single act in Canadian history. Thank you. I would now like to invite His Worship Mayor John Tory to say a few words.
Good afternoon, Premier, Your Honour, and members of the Consular Corps, members of Parliament, Adam Vaughan, members of Provincial Parliament, Han Dong, councillors Paul Ainsley, Gary Crawford, and Stephen Holliday, and members, most importantly today, of our Canadian Armed Forces past and present. May I begin by welcoming everyone to Fort York and to the City of Toronto's commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge. We're a world and a century away from the Easter Monday in France, where thousands of Canadian soldiers marched into battle. They marched straight into machine gun fire, and the creeping barrage of artillery sailed over their heads. Those bombs raining down just in front of them gave them the crucial seconds of disarray they needed to gain favorable positions. Trench by trench, line by line, inch by inch, they gained the ground. When you visit the Vimy Memorial, as I've had the privilege of doing, you can almost feel and hear what was happening a century ago. Almost. But we never really can imagine the bloody chaos of those moments. We do know the cost. 3,600 dead, 7,000 wounded. Thousands of families lost their sons, while many thousands more saw their sons come back broken by war. But we also know the victory those sacrifices secured. The 4 divisions of the Canadian Corps, fighting together in one formation for the very first time, together with the British Corps, managed to capture more ground, prisoners and artillery than any previous offensive of that great war. It was a victory for freedom, one of many to take place over time in the 20th century, but a unique victory for Canada and for Canadians. And that's because their valor over those days also helped forge the character of our then young nation. The French press called it Canada's Easter gift. Elmore Philpott, a University of Toronto student who joined the Canadian Field Artillery in 1915, said, "Vimy was the moment Canadians convinced ourselves that we were the finest troops on the Western Front." In the book Victory at Vimy, he is quoted as describing it as Canadians being tempered into a great nation. So here we are, a century later, a great nation indeed. Proud Canadians remembering the moment an essential element of our nationhood was born out of battle. And whether we're here today at Fort York or standing on Vimy Ridge in the shadow of that awesome, silent stone monument dedicated to Canada, I ask that we remember that sacrifice. Let it reignite our own dedication to our country and to our ideals of peace, order, and good government, and commit to guarding that national character over the next 100 years. A century from now, I hope that we will still remember Vimy Ridge as the moment the beacon that is Canada began to shine on the world stage, helping to blaze a path out of the mucky darkness of that great, awful war, and lighting the way since for all global citizens seeking liberty, inclusion, respect, and opportunity. And I know that beacon will still be burning in 100 years, burning bright, because the bravery and courage and sheer determination of Canadians has not waned over the last century and will not wane over the next. Time and again, as a country, as a province, and as a city, we have stood up to tyranny, spoken up against tyranny, stood up and spoken up against hate, stood up to those who would shackle others. We haven't been perfect. No people is. But we have found a way to be better, a way to fight back when freedom is imperiled, and found a way to live in peace. That is the lesson of Vimy, and that is the lesson of Canada. And that is why it's so important that future generations understand the price paid by the generation of the Great War. More than 45,000 Torontonians, including many from our Indigenous communities, served in the Canadian Expeditionary Force or with the British Army during the First World War. 3/4 of all eligible young men in the city volunteered to serve. Many never returned. More than 4,900 soldiers and nurses from Toronto died on active service during the entirety of the war. And just as it tested the spirit of individual men and women, such loss from the war would have tested the spirit of our city. But we prevailed. We emerged as a stronger city, and Canada emerged as a stronger nation. And that is another crucial lesson of Vimy. In our darkest days, when the world erupts into war and hate and terror, when the very fabric of our society threatens to tear apart, when so many of the ones we love are threatened, hurt, or lost altogether, we can still persevere. Rendons hommage au sacrifice et au courage qui a été vif en nous consacrant encore une fois à la construction du pays grand et admiré, qui est le Canada, fort et juste, de continuer à supporter les valeurs canadiennes qui étaient au cours de ces événements il y a 100 ans. We can stand behind and embrace the uniquely Canadian values and way of life that have made us home for so many millions from every corner of the globe and made us admired all over the world. None of that, the freedom, the opportunity, the leadership on human rights, the social justice, the inclusion, none of that would have been possible without the courage of Canadians at Vimy Ridge. 100 years is a long time, but what happened at Vimy Ridge is a very big event indeed, and it makes it something that we will never forget. Saying thank you seems inadequate, especially to people who aren't here. So as we do that and give our thanks, let us also, in this 150th anniversary of our great country, let us continue to build the true North, strong and free and fair and embracing, as our ultimate tribute to the sacrifice and the courage and the service of those at Vimy Ridge 100 years ago. Merci, Miigwech. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I would now like to ask Your Honour Elizabeth Dowdeswell, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, to provide some remarks.
Your Worship, Premier, parliamentarians, consular representatives, councillors, Chief, honoured veterans, members of the Canadian Forces, members of military families, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, good afternoon, bonjour, bonjour. As we come together on this traditional territory of the many Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, I want to begin by acknowledging and honouring the ancient and enduring presence of First Nations and Métis people in Ontario. I show respect today in particular to the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and note that since even before this nation's founding, First Peoples have played an integral role in stewarding this land and its people. The same, I might add, can also be said of the Queen's York Rangers. With roots dating back to the 7 Years' War, the Rangers have had the longest lineage of any Canadian military unit, stretching back more than 250 years. As your Lieutenant Governor, it is a source of pride to serve as Colonel of the Regiment of such an esteemed group of servicemen and women. 100 years ago today, on April 9th, 1917, soldiers set out through sleet and snow in France to fight a battle that had already been given up as a lost cause. But over 4 days, with resourcefulness, determination, and an unbreakable spirit of togetherness, they took Vimy Ridge. Those soldiers were Canadian. We are now well into celebrating the 150th anniversary of Confederation year. We've already begun to reflect on so many significant moments that have taught us how to live together peacefully as Canadians. One of those moments is surely the Battle of Vimy Ridge, an event that played a significant role not only in the lives of those who fought there and their families, but in the very perspectives of citizens across this country and to this very day. History books, photographs, and our ever-present media tell the story in both its horror and its glory. They describe the unity of our expeditionary force, the resourcefulness and determination, the spirit of togetherness, and a nascent sense of national identity that still reverberates every time a Canadian engages for good in this world. But I can tell you personally that nothing can prepare you for the intense emotion evoked when you approach that somber majesty of the monument at Vimy and the view atop Hill 135, including the oak forest with its undulating, crater-formed carpet of grass, or when you walk the tunnels and trenches that are marked with the last words of such very, very young men. Today, we solemnly assemble to honor the soldiers who fought so bravely for our country. They fought for principles that we continue to revere: freedom, inclusiveness, prosperous societies supported by responsible and democratic governments. In remembering the Great War, we are reminded that our liberties and the security required to pursue our dreams, our very way of life, come at a price. Those who served us have entrusted us with a debt we can never fully repay, and one that we must never forget. A number of the predecessor units of the Queen's York Rangers were well represented among the fighting force at Vimy, and some 30 members of the 20th Battalion were cited for decorations. Among the 3,598 men who laid down their lives during the conflict, we know that at least 21 had connections to the Queen's York Rangers. Today we lay wreaths in their honor. Their stories are engraved in the hearts of their families, their friends, and their descendants. Let us honor their memory, their courage, their dedication to each other, and their determination to help any who were in need. Above all, let us remember that while we have long been prepared to fight for peace, it is not our fighting that defines us. It is our spirit, our very soul, and our humanity as a country. Lest we forget, n'oublions jamais. As Her Majesty the Queen's representative in Ontario, on behalf of a very grateful province, I thank you all for being here today and for recommitting yourselves to always remembering those who serve. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Thank you, Your Honour. I would now invite the Honourable Kathleen Wynne, Premier of Ontario, to speak.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, bonjour, Annie. It's a great honor to be here. It's It's an honor to be at Fort York this afternoon in the company of our Lieutenant Governor, the Honourable Elizabeth Dowdeswell, Chief Laforne, Your Worship, John Tory, Consul General Triet, the Consuls General, and I want to especially recognize the veterans and servicemen and women here today. And to all of you, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here to mark the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge and pay respects to the Canadians who served in the First World War. C'est un honneur d'être ici pour souligner le 100e anniversaire de la bataille de la Crête de Vimy. When war broke out in 1914, thousands of young Canadians chose to enlist. They wanted to do their part. Many of them left their small towns for the very first time. They traveled a world away, unsure of what was to come and whether they would ever return. It was an incredible and humbling act of bravery. These soldiers are our heroes, but they're also our families. In a country of only about 8 million people at the time, more than 600,000 Canadians served. So it makes sense that today we still feel emotional when we think about the Great War. Because so many of us, and as I look around this crowd of people, so many of you have stories that keep us all connected to these historic events. Stories passed down by our loved ones that cannot capture the real-life horrors of war, but they ingrain in us the profound impact it had on our nation and on the peace that we enjoy. My family's connection is through my grandfather, Charlie Wynne. He signed up as soon as he finished medical school at the University of Toronto at the beginning of the war, and at the Battle of the Somme he was gassed, but he survived. My grandfather lived until I was 9 years old, and I spent a lot of time with him. I knew that his terrible and constant cough was because of the war, and it was the reason that he had to live so close to Sunnybrook Hospital. But I truly did not understand what that meant. Not once did he ever talk to me about what he personally experienced. And I know that that rings true for so many families from so many different backgrounds. We're standing right now on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples dating back countless generations. And I want to recognize and honor the well over 4,000 Indigenous soldiers who served in the Canadian Forces during the Great War. These soldiers faced prejudice and cultural barriers. Many did not speak English or French and were unfamiliar with European military structure. They were not granted the rights of Canadian citizens, and upon return were unable to access the resources available to other veterans. Yet on the front lines, Indigenous soldiers were welcomed by their fellow soldiers, and a brotherhood was formed. That kinship was also true for soldiers from across our vast country. Reflecting on his time at Whitley Camp during the war, Ben Wagner, a young man from Paisley, Ontario, said this: "You met people from Nova Scotia or from Prince Edward Island clean through to British Columbia. Very often, you didn't take any notice of the fact unless they happened to mention it." In 1914, Canadians still didn't know a lot about each other, and we had little in way of a national identity. But the Great War and the Battle of Vimy Ridge changed all that. We learned that we're not so different. From sea to sea to sea, across the plains, Canadians came together with a common goal. It was the first time all 4 divisions of the Canadian Corps fought side by side. On the front, in medical camps, and here at home, men and women banded together. For all the suffering and bloodshed, the Great War was undeniably a defining moment for our young country. And Canada's victory at Vimy Ridge became an international symbol for our grit, unity, and determination. As we celebrate 150 years since our country first formed, we also celebrate the moment 100 years ago that Canada stepped out from Britain's shadow and came into its own. Nous nous souvenons de tous les soldats qui sont morts à la défense de notre pays. We honor the legacy of Vimy Ridge and all those who fought and died defending our values. We glorify their memory, but never glorify war itself. We show our gratitude to the families of soldiers, and we vow to never forget the incredible sacrifice of all our servicemen and women. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Please stand.
to the right and call the group. Right, turn, forward, work.